etc. Glad you could make it. Today I'm doing a VR for John, better known as Dale Piper. Not sure why, but this is only the third VR that I've ever recorded. The reason I'm doing another is because one of our fellow YTPC presenters suggested that I do more of these as a way for others to get to know me better. So here I am. Today I'm smoking my Rattray's number 37 Lowland, and in it I have some LJ Peretti Tashkent. John asked us, who is the most unforgettable person that we ever met? Well, I have many, but someone that I think of often is a man I met many years ago in North Carolina. I met him when I was in the Navy, stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Previously, I was stationed in Virginia, only a couple hours away. But when I had the time, I would drive back to Virginia to see the friends that I had met there. The highway I took was an old 2-lane blacktop highway that ran through tobacco country. It was a pleasant drive and gave me an opportunity to see life in coastal Carolina. The first time I drove this route, I stopped at a small general store that was about halfway. It was just off the highway at a point where 3 dirt roads met coming in from the farmland. It was a convenient place for a general store and a fuel station. It seemed like it had been there quite a while. Among a number of things, they also sold smoked meats. If anyone has been to this part of the country, you know they know about their barbecue. I always knew when I was getting close because I could literally smell the smoke. The first time I visited, I pulled up to the gas pumps out front to fill up. They were the old kind with the round glass globes on top with the fuel station's logo. I believe it was a Sinclair station. For some reason, I remember the Dino the dinosaur image on the pump. The store was an old whitewashed building with a front porch that looked like it had been added later, but probably had been there for quite some time. There was a few old chairs with some locals sitting around up there. When I got out of the car to go to the fuel pump, an old black man that was sitting on the front porch of the general store called out to me. He said, there was no fuel. Hadn't been any since the 1960s. He told me where I could get some further up the highway and added, if I wanted any pulled pork, I'd better get with it, as they were running low. I thanked him and went inside and got a pulled pork sandwich and a bottle of RC Cola. When I came out, he asked me if I was in the service. I said yes, I was in the Navy. He thanked me for my service, and then he said that I needed a haircut. I laughed and I agreed with him. He just smiled. He then stood up, extended his hand, and said, my name is Obadiah Johnson. Pleased to meet you. I remember that first time we were shaking hands, how struck I was at how tall he was. He had to have been 6'5", 6'6". I'm 6'2", but he still seemed to just tower over me. While standing in front of him, I noticed he was wearing a light gray suit, starched white shirt, black tie, and had a nice gray fedora. His shoes were in perfect condition and polished brightly. I also noticed he had the biggest darn shoes I'd ever seen in quite some time. After we spoke, he sat back down on the front porch, leaning on his cane that was between his legs, and just kind of sat there, kind of stoic looking. As I was leaving, I happened to notice there were 3 wood signs hanging in the big window of the store. One was in the shape of a chicken, another a pig, and the last one, a cow. While looking at those signs, someone inside turned around the one that was in the shape of a pig. It then had a big red X on it. I later found out that it meant they were out of that particular meat. And I remember being pleased that he told me about them running low on pulled pork. When I was inside, I was told that they only smoke so much meat a day, and when it was out, there wasn't any more, until maybe the next day. Maybe. I visited that store many times over the next 2 years. Sometimes I would drive there just to get away and relax. It's just a nice, peaceful area. Of course, I would get me some of that great barbecue, and many times sat on the front porch chatting with Obadiah. We discussed, all kinds of things. Growing chili peppers, making moonshine, and everything else under the sun. But after getting those topics out of the way, the conversation usually turned to barbecue. It was on one of my earlier visits that I came to realize that Obadiah owned that store. It was his recipes that he had developed over the years that were being used for this barbecue. He still made the sauce and the rub that were used in cooking these meats. In one of our conversations, I made the rookie mistake by asking him how he made his barbecue sauce. Any of my fellow barbecue addicts can attest to this. This is something you just don't do. But he was nice about it and offered me some hints and pointers so I could give it a try myself. I did. And on my visits back to his store, I'd bring a small mason jar with a sample of the latest version of my sauce. He'd always take it from me and hold it up to the light and inspect it. He would then open it up and smell it while mumbling under his breath. After that, he would stick his long finger in it and smell it again, and then he'd taste it. He'd put the lid back on, and more times than not, he would look a little displeased. He'd say something like, "You sure you didn't need a little bit more vinegar?" Or, "You seem to have used regular sugar and not sugar syrup." Like I said, he'd just hand it back to me. A lot of times he'd smile. Needless to say, over time, my barbecue sauce had many, many changes. It took over a year, but on one trip, I took him a sample that I was sure he would appreciate. As usual, he went through the same method of assessing my sauce. But this time, when he handed it back to me, he said, "You got it. This sauce is you. You did good." I was overjoyed. I did it. I passed Obadiah's inspection. Some months later, when I was a few weeks away from being discharged from the Navy, I went back to see him. I took my sauce as usual. But this time, I didn't need for him to inspect it. That part was already done. So this time, I simply held up a jar that now had a label on it. It said, Albemarle sauce. Albemarle is the area of North Carolina where Obadiah lived. And they have their own style of barbecue sauce there. He looked at the jar I was holding up, and when I said, "How do you like that name?" he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, but I can't read that." I thought maybe the print was too small, but I never remembered him ever wearing glasses. He saw the confused look on my face, and then he said, "Son, I can't read. I never learned how." Afterwards, I realized why he had used those signs with the pig, cow, and chicken shapes. Many folks in that area are like him. They're illiterate. They were born into poverty, and attending school was a luxury to them. They worked instead. So why is he the most unforgettable person? Well, because Obadiah prevailed in life in spite of his lack of education and the fact that he was born and raised in a sharecropper's shack. That shack once housed slaves. All during his childhood, it never had any running water. They had to get their water from a hand pump down by the barn, and their toilet was an old outhouse used by other folks in the other shacks. This shack had 2 rooms and was home to him, his parents, and 4 other siblings. Obadiah reinforced in me what I had learned years before. I just didn't recognize it or know how to apply it. But he gave me a real example of what it is to set your goals and pursue them in spite of what others may think. He also showed me the only limits on what you can accomplish in life is you. So first, you had to believe in yourself. You should respect your family by appreciating what you have, because that's what they earned. He knew he could get out of poverty if he applied himself. He was turned down by the Army during World War II because of his illiteracy. Instead, they had him working as a laborer for the war effort at a local farm. Even though it was a difficult and dirty, thankless job, he did it anyway. He told himself that one day he was going to work a respectable job. Well, he did. In doing so, Obadiah gained the respect of those that knew him. They knew he was a good, honest man. He told me he had come to realize that his success was due in part to him finally realizing why he became the man he was. He usually had a somewhat stern look on his face. Life can do that to you sometimes. But he was also quick with a smile when pleased. He knew the good things in life. Obadiah always spoke well of his friends and family and appreciated being in a close-knit community where these values were common. Obadiah was raised under the guidance of not only his parents, but also his grandparents, aunts, uncles, and by his church. His example was a huge influence on me and made me realize I too could believe in myself like he believed in himself, to be comfortable with who I am. From then on, I have come to appreciate that life was a journey, and if you're open to learning, your life will take you in a new and better direction. It's your choice. After leaving the Navy, I started college, but remained in the Navy Reserves. On one of my 2-week summer deployments, I went to see Obadiah. It had been 2 years. When I drove up, he was still wearing a light gray suit, but it was a new one. He was wearing a starched white shirt, black tie, and a new fedora. He seemed genuinely pleased to see me, and we talked for quite some time, all while I ate my barbecue sandwiches. He said He was glad I came by and told him I was doing well. He said that he had often thought of me and what it might be like in my new life. It was a great visit. He seemed content as usual. A year later, I went back to see him again. But he wasn't there. The store manager inside, who happened to be his niece, said he had passed away about 6 months prior to my visit. He had cancer. I always wondered why he never told me he was ill. But his niece said that's just the way he was. He never put his load on anyone else, no matter how big. She also told me that he had given the store to his nieces and nephews as a way to help them get ahead in life. It's what people do in his area. Obadiah married late in life and had no children. I asked her if he gave them the secret recipe for that barbecue sauce. She said no. They had to do what I did. Learn it on their own. He literally took that recipe to his grave. I learned a great deal from this illiterate Southern black man and can honestly say he taught me more than I ever learned in college. I hope I never forget what he taught me. And to help remind me, ever since that last visit, my sauce has been called Obadiah's Secret. Thanks for dropping into Pipes, etc., and I hope you will again. Until then, good day.